love seeing you two together again. You always were my favorites. You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Enough said.
Yo, what is up guys, this is Tyranic Swine here and welcome to another game review. This time I'm reviewing Marvel's Spider-Man, an action-adventure superhero game where you play as the man himself, Spider-Man, based off from the comic books and the MCU films, that was developed by Insomniac of all people and of course is published by Sony since this was a PS4 exclusive. Now, to my surprise, this game is actually split into 3 acts, which is not something you see often in open world type games, where you usually just have to guess where the story is going, but at least in Marvel's Spider-Man you can actually at least keep up with the story and where it's going, with the fact that there is 3 acts to it. Now I'm going to be going through these acts one by one, and kicking it off with the first act, it starts off relatively normal for a Spider-Man game. We see Peter Parker's apartment all trashed up, and like his tech and everything's all over the place, and he isn't keeping up with his rent. It's pretty much another normal day for Peter Parker, and then obviously he hears like the sirens and all the police going to a specific place, which is apparently where Wilson Fisk is, and so Spider-Man ends up taking him down to like start off his normal day of taking down villains. Now, even though Spider-Man does actually defeat Fisk, it does end up causing a bit of chaos around the city since a new gang called the Demons start going around and messing things up. And so basically Peter has to go around trying to figure out who these guys are and who they're working for, and that he has to stop them. Now, even though the first act is a little slow and takes time for things to build up, I thought this was a great way for starting this game. It just starts off with Peter Parker being Spider-Man and just another average day, taking out villains and doing other things around the city, while also trying to balance things out with his like normal life as Peter Parker, like his work situation and all that kind of stuff, and just like relationship business. This game pretty much shows off, well, especially in the first act, just another normal day for Spider-Man, and the fact that we have this new enemy group coming in to try and mess things up despite the fact that he just took down a big bad guy. However, the second act does definitely become a lot more serious as the leader of the Demons, the Negative Man, reveals himself, and when a bombing goes off in New York, it obviously makes people more frightened of the Demons and what they're capable of. So Peter Parker decides to go to Mary Jane to ask her help to figure out why the Negative Man and the Demons are attacking Norman Osborn and Oscorp specifically. And after investigating multiple secret projects within Oscorp, they find out that they were making something called Devil's Breath, which was a failed project meant to help the human body with mental and physical disabilities, and that the demons are after it for some weird reason. And with the situations with the demons becoming more dire as the day goes on, Norman decides to call in a security force called Sable, led by Silver Sable, who come into New York and try to make the whole situation with the demons calm down a little more, but in turn it makes Spider-Man's movability and navigation of the city a lot more difficult, as these guys don't particularly like Spider-Man's way of doing things. However, just when Spidey's day thought it couldn't get any worse, it turns out there was a prison riot going on, and in turn, this riot helps Spider-Man's worst villains come together to beat him down and form the Sinister Six. Now, I really like how the second act escalated the whole problem that was going on with the demons. We started to learn more about them and the Negative Man, the guy who was in charge, and why his reasons for doing his stuff in the first place, which I will get to when I start going about characters and the story in general in more aspect. But The fact that we have Spider-Man and Mary Jane working together to try and like figure things out, and the fact that there's also stuff going on between them is also like having an impact on this whole situation. I liked how the second act was just trying to just make the situation escalate more and more, and it's just getting more difficult for Spider-Man to solve this whole like situation easily. I do like how we were going for a more espionage type stuff, trying to figure out what Oscorp has been doing behind the scenes, all these failed projects they've been doing, stuff that could harm the people of New York, and just trying to figure out what the hell they've been doing all this time. But at this point in the story, I was starting to feel like the Negative Man wasn't exactly a great main villain. I mean, he was good enough since he was a character I haven't really seen before in the films. So this is pretty much an introduction to a character that's entirely new to me, which I do like. But for a main villain at this point, I thought it was a little bit weak. But oh boy, when you get to the end of the second act, man, I wasn't expecting the Sinister Six to come together. I mean, sure, these guys like Electro, Vulture, and Rhino were all being like talked about throughout the game, but I wasn't expecting something to happen where these guys suddenly just come together and like whoop Spider-Man's ass and then just go into the city about to do God knows what. Because at this point, the game was about to get really exciting. So as we go into the third act of the game, Doc Ock decides to release the Devil's Breath on the people of New York, and obviously this makes a shit ton of people ill or dying from the side effects that it causes, and just chaos just spreads around the entire city since now there's a bunch of escaped convicts, and now Spider-Man's worst villains are going all over the place just killing people and trying to do things for Doc Ock. Spidey does his best to try and calm the chaos down, and in the meantime does actually discover why Negative Man and Doc Ock have been attacking Norman Osborn and Oscorp all this time, and it's a pretty big deal. However, amidst all the fighting, Aunt May ends up getting infected by the Devil's Breath because she's been trying to help the people in New York, and this makes Peter become really desperate to save her because Doc Ock is the only one who has the cure to save her. So Spidey goes out there, gets geared up, and heads out to Doc Ock to fight him one last time so he can get the cure back so he can save Aunt May. And despite the fact that he wins, the ending isn't exactly good for Spider-Man. Now, the final act of this game is absolutely incredible. The Sinister Six being added into this game at this point was really good. The Negative Man on his own was okay, but he wasn't fantastic. But having the Sinister Six just gives that extra boost that the game really needed to just make it really incredible. This third act also brutally rips apart Spider-Man. I mean, not only does he have to take down all these villains yet again and just trying to save the city on his own, but the end of this game really isn't great for Peter, and you just feel sorry for him. I'm not going to entirely spoil what happens at the end of this game, but damn do you feel sorry for Spider-Man, really. The overall experience of the story is really good. The 3-act system that it had going was actually done very well. It had a nice, simple, good opening act for just like a normal average day for Peter Parker as Spider-Man. Then Act 2 has the situation escalating as we figure out more of the demons and what the Negative Man is up to and why he's attacking Norman Osborn and Oscorp specifically. And then the third act just brings in that nice amount of sweetness that this game needed to just make it just incredible to experience, and it goes out with a bang. Just such a heartfelt ending that just made this story so worthwhile to play. Now, I did clock in about 30 to 35 hours into this game, though then again, half of that time is probably the story, while the other half is like side activities and collectibles, which there is a lot of in this game, which I'll get to in a minute. Now first, I am going to talk about the characters, and there's a huge roster of characters in the game, which isn't really a surprise since the Marvel Universe has a shit ton of characters to look out for, but luckily since this is Spider-Man, it's only going to have characters that are connected to Spider-Man and the Spider-Man comics. Now let's focus on the big man himself, that is Spider-Man, and this is once again another great alliteration of Spider-Man. I mean, Yuri Watanabe as the voice actor for Peter Parker or Spider-Man in this game was absolutely fantastic. He's likable, he's a relatable character, and he just does the character justice with just the way he is. And what I really like about this is the fact that it's a more older and experienced Peter Parker instead of what Tom Holland's Spider-Man is. Instead, this is a Spider-Man who's been around, done some stuff, and is used to this superhero business by now. I also love how funny this version of Spider-Man is. Deadpool would love this version, and I just love the quippy jokes he makes in and out of combat. It's just so great and so well timed, and just the connection he has with the other characters with these jokes, so good. And the game gets the personal and superhero life with Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, so right. I mean, he obviously loves being a superhero and does a good job at it, but his personal life obviously isn't doing so great, with the fact that he's like struggling with renting his apartment and amongst other things that I'll get to in a minute with other characters. But the game does that separation so well that we don't really see often in other superheroes. Now let's move on to Mary Jane. Now Mary Jane as a character as a whole has always been a bit iffy with me. I don't know if that's because I'm still not over Kirsten Dunst's performance of Mary Jane, which really obviously wasn't that great to me in the Sam Raimi trilogy, but Mary Jane in this game, she's okay. But the main situation that we have going on with Mary Jane and Peter Parker is the fact that these two are actually split up, which I am kind of surprised, and the main focus between these two is actually them two getting back together. I mean, sure, they have their situation of awkwardness where they're like trying to do this, you know, investigation crap, and Peter doesn't want MJ getting in danger, which is one of the main reasons why they did split up. But honestly, this felt like this was the only thing they used for these two characters when they were with each other. It was okay, but I don't know, it's for some reason this whole split up thing and them getting back together again, it didn't work great. It's pretty much the only drag I have with the story is just the whole breakup situation between Mary Jane and Peter Parker. I'll tell you one thing, Mary Jane is certainly not Black Cat, and Black Cat is definitely doing well for herself. Now, a character that I knew who was in this game, but I wasn't actually expecting a lot of concentration on, was Miles Morales. Now, 2018 has been a pretty good year for his character, not only just in this game, but also in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which has really helped get people into knowing his character more. But in this game, he's much more mature compared to his film counterpart, especially with the way we saw him handle his father's death. He wasn't like the cliched character we'd usually see, as he pointed out to Peter with the stuff he would say, and he knew what he was going to say. But Miles, he took it okay for the most part. But in dangerous situations, Miles can actually be pretty damn smart, which would probably need to be, and it really sets up his character for the eventual conclusion where he will become Spider-Man himself. And I really like the fact that he's also a fan of Spider-Man. He's a big fanboy. He's practically like us, the guys who enjoy the Spider-Man comics or just the Marvel Universe in general or the Marvel films, and that's pretty much what we would be like if we ever saw Spider-Man. And so Miles basically looks up to him as pretty much a superhero. Pretty much he's just a big fanboy, and I really like that about his character. Now, it wouldn't be a Spider-Man game without Aunt May. She's a fairly prominent character in the game, and she works at a place called Feast, which is where homeless people are able to stay and hopefully get back on their feet to find a career or a job. I mean, she's always there to give some good advice to Peter when things aren't looking good for him, or he's just in a down situation. And she's always there to just trying her best to just help people and trying to sort things out. But sadly, that would end up being her downfall in this game. And now next we have Yuri Watanabe. I don't know if I completely fucked up that name, but still, she's the only police captain who has contact with Spider-Man, and she helps him out from time to time, telling him what kind of big crimes are going on. She also helps him out with investigations, especially with the stuff that's going on within the game itself, like the whole situation with the demons and that crap. Though she wasn't as helpful as MJ, she definitely, at least she is someone on the police force who actually somewhat trusts Spider-Man, which I really like. I like, because usually in the films you never get to see a sort of police-type character who's helping Spider-Man with the situation and all these crimes and everything. And honestly, the chemistry between Spider-Man and Yuri it's odd, but it's absolutely funny. I just love the gimmicks that went on between the two of them, especially Spider-Cop. I mean, you gotta love that thing that went on between those two, because damn, just the banter between these two was absolutely fantastic. I loved the connection these two had.
Okay, wrapped up.
Thanks for that. Now I'm seeing an assault near you.
You're in luck, Yuri.
Your favorite tough but lovable, grizzled, seen-too-much detective is in town.
What? No. You promised you wouldn't do that
Spider Cop.
Please, no.
Okay, now let's move on to the villains, and we'll start off with the Negative Man. Now, it's revealed that it's actually Martin Lee who's the guy in charge of Feast. It reveals it's him pretty early on in the game, and I keep thinking the writers sort of did that. They weren't trying to fool us into hiding his identity. They wanted to make it obvious that it was him in the first place. I think what they were trying to hide the most was the reason for why he was attacking Norman and Oscorp, and apparently it's a pretty damn big secret. Because it turns out Doc Ock and Norman, who used to be good buddies, actually gave him his powers in the first place, and obviously that must have drove Negative Man or Martin Lee insane, and he just wanted justice for the things that they did to him, which honestly seems like a good enough reason. He just didn't go about doing it the right way. Although I will admit, the fact that he was the main villain throughout pretty much most of the story, it was decent at first, but the more the game went on, it really wasn't helping him being the main villain. I just like the fact that he's a villain I haven't seen before, but if he was the main villain throughout the whole game, it would have been a little bit disappointing. So luckily, the fact that they brought in a Sinister Six really helped out with that situation. Now, Otto Octavius being in this game was a rather surprising welcome. I mean, I wasn't expecting him to end up being the main villain, since him and Peter have such a good relationship in the laboratory that they're in, trying to do like all these sort of new gizmos and things to try and help out like people with like sort of physical difficulties, like if like amputations on that, all that sort of thing, hopefully trying to make robotic limbs, until Otto eventually just succumbs to the amount of failures he's experienced, and that he just doesn't want to have any more failures in his life. So once Otto decided to start making the neural implant, which allows him to control the iconic robotic arms that he has, obviously at that point in the game, I knew we were going to get Doc Ock. I was like, yep, we're going there. And boy, it's a great journey and a good setup. I really like it. I mean, probably a lot of people saw it coming, but the way it was done was just so good. I just liked it, especially since we had that relationship with Peter and Otto, and the fight between them was much more sadder and personal compared to what it would have been in the like Spider-Man 2 from Sam Raimi's trilogy. It was so much more personal than that, and just the fact that Peter just looked up to Otto as like a mentor and a father figure just makes the final battle just so much sadder, and you're like, shit, this really wasn't the way I wanted it to go down. And just the truth that he was hiding about his past, that he was working with Norman too, that Doc Ock is certainly one of the best characters in this game, and I'm really glad that he was given the chance to be the main villain, and just they did such a good like story structure wise with him and Peter. Now, another character I really wasn't expecting to pop up was Norman Osborn. Hell, I was expecting to see like a newspaper with him being in prison or some shit for being the Green Goblin, but apparently that crap hadn't even happened yet. And even though he is like a victim in all the attacks that happened to him, honestly, he's pretty much the true villain of this whole game, because some of the things we discover about what he's been doing in Oscorp, it's not good. And honestly, the secret ending, well, not the secret ending, but the after credit scene that we see in the end of this game, yeah, I think we can all tell if they make a sequel to this game, we all know Norman's going to be the next big bad guy, because you end up discovering that he's actually making some shady shit, much like he uses when he's the Green Goblin, like the bloody pumpkin grenades or whatever the hell he uses. And I'm just like, ooh, I know where this is going. So even though Norman may be being attacked a lot, we all know where he's going to be going in the end. I also like the fact that we got to see another villainous sort of character, Silver Sable, who ends up showing halfway through the game and is like in charge of Sable, the security force that Oscorp hired. But her character was kind of surprising. I mean, sure, she hates Spider-Man at first because like he's getting in the way and all that stuff, and it's just making her job more difficult. But when Norman starts to lose faith in her like abilities to protect him and sees what Spider-Man's trying to do, she eventually realizes her own wrongdoing, and I'm like, wow, shit, I wasn't expecting a turnaround this big from a character like her, considering how much she hated Spider-Man, but damn, I mean, hell, at least she actually turns over a new leaf and tries to actually start anew. And of course you have all the other like side villains that you see throughout the whole game. You have Rhino, Vulture, Electro, Scorpion. You also have Tombstone, Shocker, and Taskmaster throughout this game. There's a lot of villains in this game, and I really do appreciate that. Because not only do we get the main Sinister Six guys, apart from Mysterio obviously, which is kind of disappointing, but you also just get a bunch of smaller villains that not a lot of people will know about. I mean, during this generation of like Marvel Mania, the only villains that people are gonna know are just like the main big ones like Green Goblin, Doc Ock, those guys. But I really like how characters like Tombstone, Shocker, and even Taskmaster in this game. Characters I hardly know, and now I got to see what they were like. I'm actually more interested in what their characters are like thanks to this game. Although from a story aspect, they aren't really used that much, other than just some funny villain banter and just some good boss fights, but it's just still nice to have these guys in the game. Okay, now let's move on to the main aspect of this game, and that is the gameplay itself. Now the gameplay is absolutely fantastic. The mechanics in this game are probably some of the best mechanics you've seen in a Spider-Man game since the first Spider-Man 2 game, back in the early 2000s. At least that's what I've heard, because I haven't really played many of the Spider-Man games, including that one, but damn, does this game make a good representation of what Spider-Man feels like. The swinging animation and just the motion of it is just amazing to experience, and you feel 100% of the time like you are Spider-Man, swinging through New York City, beating up bad guys and saving people. And there are plenty of different swinging methods that you can use to get across the city in quick succession. Like you have your usual swing that Spider-Man uses, but you also have quicker ones like web zip or a zip to point or even point launch, which are very handy at getting across the city very fast. And you can even do air tricks if you're bored, which can even help build XP for you, even though it's very minimal, but it's something. Not only that, you can climb or run up walls or hang from the ceiling, much like Spider-Man would do, and this can be very handy for when you're scoping out the areas so you can see where the enemies are and see if you can get to certain areas that can be handy at taking them out. Now moving on to the combat. Now I was a little bit suspicious that what people were saying is this game might work a little bit similar to the Batman Arkham series. Now I haven't played those games much, but I will eventually. But I was still a little bit suspicious, but thankfully, the combat in this game is absolutely fantastic. Now you have a huge variety of moves and combos that you can use against the enemy either on the ground or even in the air. Now alongside Spider-Man's usual punching and kicking, he also has a huge amount of different web attacks that you can use to outsmart his enemies, and eventually as you get used to these mechanics and the combos you have, since it is actually a large list of them, when you upgrade yourself enough, you'll be able to take out your enemies in very quick succession. Now when you're fighting against hordes of enemies, they won't attack you one at a time. In fact, they'll hit you either their fists or whatever weapons they're holding at the time, but luckily thanks to Spidey's reflexes, you can use his spider sense to dodge enemy attacks and also use counter moves against him if you time it correctly. You also have a limited amount of health, which can only be refilled by either beating up all the enemies in the area or refilling your focus bar, which can be filled up by getting a good amount of successful combos, and the better the combo, the more you will be able to refill. Now I sort of somewhat like this mechanic. It was very well done. The fact that you have a limited amount of health and it would only regenerate if you killed all the enemies in the area, but also the fact that you can actually refill it by sacrificing the focus bar, which can actually help out with a different sort of finishing moves, which I'll probably explain later on. But yeah, I really did like how the system worked with the health bar. Now Spider-Man does have a huge array of suits and gadgets that you can use throughout the game. There are over 8 different gadgets that you can use that all have different projectiles for different situations. And you have the normal web shooter to entangle your enemies, but there are others like the electric webs for shocking your enemies, spider drones that will just go out and just spray attacks or stun projectiles on the enemies. You have web bombs that instantly web enemies, or even trip mines that web enemies to the wall without them realizing. I did like the amount of different variety of gadgets, and they all can be useful for different situations. But they have limited ammunition, so you need to be careful of that. And the only one of these shooters that regenerates this ammunition is the normal web shooters. The other gadgets, you're going to have to knock out enemies or have a specific upgrade that you can use to get ammunition for these gadgets a lot more easier. Now definitely one of the best bits is the amount of different Spider-Man suits that you can use in the game. And overall there's about 27 of them. them, and that's discounting those from updates and DLC. And that's a lot right there for a good amount of customization. Some of these suits are from the comics, some are from the movies, and some are actually created within the game itself. However, almost every single suit has a different suit power that can be used in many situations during combat, like one that can help build focus faster, or one that can shock your enemies and their equipment. And there's multiple variations of suit powers that make your normal attacks different. They can be more powerful, more shocking, or more concussive. And so there's many different variations of powers that you can use to tackle your enemies. There's even multiple suit powers that can create a blast wave to knock your enemies off their feet. And trust me, with some fights being taking place on rooftops, these powers can kick absolute ass. And not only does this create a lot of variety, you can even use these powers with other suits, which is absolutely fantastic. You can have like different types of combinations with your favorite suit and power. I really like that. There's so much freedom here, and that's what I love about this game, is the fact there is so much freedom of like gameplay, and it's not hackled down by shittiness of microtransactions and that other sorts of bullshit that we've seen in plenty of other games. For once, we actually can do whatever the fuck we want with these powers and suits. However, I will admit there are some suit powers that aren't very useful. I think I used about probably 3/4 of them most of the time, but there were some that were a bit shitty and not fantastic. But the majority of them are actually very useful. Not only that, you even have 3 slots for suit mods, which are basically just more modifications for your suits to make yourself a little bit more powerful and just better in combat. Although I will admit, even though there's quite a decent amount of these mods, you do unlock like multiple good ones very early on in the game, which is like reduced melee damage and reduced bullet damage, and you get these very quickly, and these are pretty much what I use throughout pretty much the entire game, and just swapped one mod here and there for like different situations. I mean, I like the amount of different mods there were, but the fact that you get like the best ones fairly early on, kind of hurts the gameplay a little bit there. Now, there are also skills in this game which can be gained by getting skill points by leveling up Spider-Man, and the cap level is 50, and that's not very difficult to achieve if you do everything within the game. And there are 3 categories of skills to unlock. You have Innovator, Defender, and Web Slinger. Innovator helps with slinging objects towards the enemies, stealth takedowns, and disarming your opponents, which, trust me, that is very handy for when you're going up against large hordes of enemies that carry bloody guns and rocket launchers. Defender helps with giving you more defensive moves against your enemy and improves your focus building while also making your dodging abilities better from incoming attacks, whilst Web Slinger gives you more options of traversing the city in quicker succession and more air combat moves. Now, I did like the way the skill tree was set out, although it did remind me a lot of the Borderlands skill tree. But then again, if it works, you don't need to mess around with it, just improve upon it and do your own thing with it. And that's exactly what they did, and it was really pretty damn good. Now let's move on to the enemy mechanics themselves, and there's actually a large amount of enemy variation in the game, ranging from normal everyday thugs to escaped convicts, demons, and Sable security teams. Now these guys can be pretty damn fun to fight against, but in big numbers they can be quite challenging early on when you don't really have many upgrades, and dodging their projectile and grenade attacks can be quite annoying at times, especially if they spam them. But once you get upgrades, they will fall to you pretty damn quickly, and especially once you've gotten used to the combat mechanics too, and if you use plenty of your gadgets, they will definitely help out in dire situations. My main problem with the enemies themselves is just the fact that they're mostly the same classes apart from a few exceptions. Like, you'll always see like some guy using either his fists or some other weapon, like a melee weapon like a shield, or using a gun or a rocket launcher, or even having the big cliche big dude, and after a while these guys can get a little bit tedious to fight. However, because of the different factions that they are aligned to, they all have their own kinds of powers or classes. Like Sable has these jetpack guys, the prisoners have these whiplash guys, which is obviously a shout out to Iron Man 2, and the demons have their own abilities to help them out, like the negative force or whatever the fuck they use. So even though each of the factions have mostly the same enemies from most of the time, they do have their own like sort of special class that they can use to make the combat a little bit more different and add a bit more variety of types of enemies to go up against. Now, definitely one of the best parts of this game is the boss fights, and a lot of games I find these days, the boss fights are not that good. There's always those gems out there where I find some really good boss fights, but this game, man, it had a good amount of them. Because not only is there the boss fights fun to fight, but there's actually a good amount of them. Now, throughout the game, there's about 9 boss fights, I think. And what's really great is the fact that each boss is different. The developers took note of each of the supervillains' powers and put them into account to make each fight varied in the ways you have to defeat them. Very notable ones would be Taskmaster, who uses your own moves against you, so you have to think of different moves just to be able to defeat him. And another one would be Tombstone, who can't be hurt by your normal punches and has to be incapacitated, giving you the chance to deal heavy attacks on him. They even have you fighting against multiple bosses at once during the final act. Like you have Vulture working with Electro, and they have their own moveset, and then you have Rhino and Scorpion, who also have their own movesets. And you have to basically keep an eye on both of these to like take them both out. Now you do have to fight against the Negative Man twice. The first fight isn't as good as the second, since the first one's in a secluded area, whilst the second one is a more open area and you can like dodge his attacks a little bit more easier. But damn, the second fight against him, that's pretty damn fun. But the final boss fight being Doc Ock, that just puts the cherry on the cake and is a great way to end this game, because man, is it a lot of fun to fight him. And it's just the fact that the emotional connection between Peter and Ock just make that fight so much more personal. Now let's move on to one of the biggest parts of the game, and that is the collectibles. There's a large amount of collectibles and side activities to do in this game, and they will more or less take up probably about half of your time. And the great thing about this is that Insomniac didn't go anywhere near, as I said before, with like microtransactions or any of that other sort of bullshit, and instead they actually made a proper game, much like a game from the early 2000s, where literally all the collectibles and side activities you do are vital to making Spider-Man stronger and better equipped. Now there is actually a wide variety of these collectibles and side activities, and when it comes to collectible areas, you have stuff like finding backpacks which have memoirs from Spidey's adventures, and these are actually pretty damn sweet memoirs too. There's like a lot of backstory here, and there might be some stuff here that comic book like readers will definitely notice. There's like, you can take pictures of landmarks around New York, and there is some like Marvel related buildings around. You have like Doctor Strange's house and the Avengers Tower, which does make you think why these guys weren't in the game in the first place, especially since New York does go to hell at some point, which is kind of weird. Then again, who knows, they might trust Spider-Man enough to like sort out this whole situation himself. You even have these little cat toys that Black Cat has dotted around the city, which lead you to her safe house of like stuff she stole, even though it's pretty much just a lead up to a brand new suit that she made specifically for you. But then again, it's obviously it sets up the DLC for her character. You also have a load of side activities too. There's like different crimes happening around the city caused by the various factions you meet against, like Sable, thugs, demons, and all those other kind of guys. You have like these different research stations that are set up by Harry, which is actually kind of interesting since they are used to try and help improve the environmental nature of the city, which even though some people might think is a little bit political, it's actually kind of a nice message about global warming because, yeah, I mean, this sort of shit can happen. You also have these faction hideouts to take out as well, which is like Fisk's men or demons that are in like a secluded building or area that you have to take out, and there's like certain amount of waves of them, and you have to do like certain special techniques and objectives whilst taking them out too. They're pretty damn fun, but it's not something we haven't seen before. But I do like the way you can actually go in stealth like at first before like all the guys eventually know you're there. And then there's these challenges that Taskmaster has set out around the city for you to do, which are like have 4 different sort of like categories for them. You have like this drone following challenge, you have like this stealth takedown challenge, you have a combat challenge, and then you also have like this deactivating bombs challenge in like a very quick time. These are pretty fun to do and are probably the only sort of side activity in the game that's kind of grindy, but it's a good kind of grindy. It's like it makes you want to try and improve yourself to make yourself better. And each of these collectibles or side activities will offer various tokens for you, like research, crime, base, challenge, or even backpack and landmark tokens. And these are basically what you would use to unlock and upgrade your gadgets and suits. So basically completing everything on the map is definitely worth it. And it just gives that nostalgia vibe from like retro games where you pretty much have to get everything you can to make the best possible version of your character. And I like that. I miss those type of games. And this game has brought that like that sort of thing back, and I love it. Now let's take a look at the level design itself. Now considering the whole map is just New York, it's going to look smaller compared to many other different open world games that have come out in the recent years. But honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think a smaller map compared to other games is a bit of a good thing. And this is probably the best looking version of New York that I have seen and travelled around. Well, in video game form, that is. It just looks so nice going around New York and just doing different things. And other games that, like open world games that are like set in cities, always end up looking dull, like Watch Dogs. But Spider-Man definitely makes the whole city vibe world really good to travel around. Now there is a good amount of main and side missions throughout the game. I like how some of them are structured and very differently, like some more action-based, where others can be more stealthy, or some you're just basically trying to find something you need, where there's like some puzzles scattered around here and there. Although there is a few missions where it's like you go somewhere just to experience a cutscene and that's it, but I feel like this helps settle the mood a little bit before you get into the action again. I do like how in some missions though that you can actually do little puzzles or go through vents or just climb up walls to get up to the next section or to avoid an obstacle. Like for example, there's a mission where you go up an elevator shaft and you have to avoid enemies spotting you or debris falling on you when the whole place starts to fall apart. I really did like that section. Or a mission where you're trying to like sort of hack into Oscorp's like modules so you can break inside and whilst avoiding like security spotting you. I like those kind of missions and help separate the action and stealth-like stuff going on. Funny enough, you don't even get to play the whole game as Spider-Man. There are some missions where you actually get to play as Mary Jane or even Miles, although these are mainly stealth sections, but they do try to expand the mechanics a little further every sequence. However, I felt like there was probably a bit too many of these sort of situations. Like the Mary Jane ones, it's just the fact that when you eventually get a stun gun, it's like, why the hell did you not have one in the first place? And then Miles has this sort of like hat bot, which can be very handy. But I think like the best instance of one of these is when Miles is trying to basically dodge Rhino in like a dockyard or something like that. That was a really hectic moment, but most of these, they were sort of It's like, did it really need to be there? I kind of like the idea of it, but the fact that there was quite a large amount of them kind of felt a little bit unnecessary. I also do like how there's these little kind of different puzzle sort of things to do. Like when you go to Doc Ock's lab, you can complete like projects on a spectrograph where you can put together pieces to identify a substance, or you have like these circuit projects you can do as well. These do also appear in certain missions so to like keep you up to date on doing them, but these are like nice little puzzles that are just pretty fun to do. They're not too difficult, although if you're doing the circuit projects or the substance stuff, they can get a little bit challenging, but it's a nice kind of challenging. Surprisingly, there's even fast travel in this game, and you'd probably think it's pretty damn pointless to have it in a Spider-Man game. But honestly, this is probably one of the funniest fast travel mechanics I've seen in the game, because if you actually fast travel, there's like a little nice loading cutscene where you can see some funny instances on the subway, like Spider-Man meeting another Spider-Man. Now the soundtrack is absolutely spectacular. It's like a mixture of Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland's Spider-Man's mashed into one, and it's just awesome hearing the main theme while swinging around New York. And not only that, it hits you right when it wants to, like when the situation is critical and the music is frantic as hell, or when a sad moment happens and it starts getting the piano going, it just hits you right in the feels. The soundtrack is just superb, and I absolutely loved it. It's probably one of the best soundtracks I've heard for a good while. Now when it comes to graphics, the game looks absolutely stunning. This is definitely one of the best looking games I've seen from 2018 so far, and there were plenty of moments for the graphics to shine. The character models were really good, and the look of the characters would fit really well compared to their comic or movie counterparts. I just love how impressive the Spider-Man and villain suits looked as well, and the detail that was put into them has to be well applauded. It does surprise me how people will whine about the graphics of this game, the fact that there were less puddles or something because of that there was more in the E3 showcase from 2017 or 2018, I can't remember which, but the skyline at times, holy shit does it look amazing. And trust me, the fact that people whined about freaking there being less puddles, they're just fucking idiots. Although I will admit there were a few glitches that I did encounter, although very minute ones like enemies getting caught in corners or walls making it difficult to hit them, but luckily even if they did get stuck in a wall I did manage to hit them to like finish this certain activity instead of having to restart it. I just had to be very accurate. But other than that there wasn't really too many glitches.
And that's it. Gonna be sore tomorrow. Okay, time to find Felicia. She said she was heading into that building.
One thing that really did impress me is the fact that the citizens actually interact with you. Sometimes after you beat bad guys or you're just walking around the city, random people will just actually go up to Spider-Man and thank him. And it is kind of funny seeing Spidey's reaction and awkward interactions with these people. And sometimes you will find unexpected thugs will try to take you out when you least expect it when you're going through the city. What I love about this is that it makes the city feel alive and active, and it just doesn't feel like these people are just there, like they're just symbols of code just added in. There's actual life here, and they actually do shit. While you're traversing the city, you also get to hear Jonah Jameson on his new radio show, spouting things about Spider-Man and stuff that's going on, related to the missions and just, being an angry fellow. But sadly, he isn't voiced by J.K. Simmons, even though we would all have loved to have heard that. But trust me, it would have been amazing if J.K. Simmons voiced him in this game again.
You serious?
And finally, in the main menu, I did like the names for the difficulties that were set for this game. You have Friendly Neighborhood, Friendly, Amazing, and Spectacular. I also like how there's lots of accessibility options for players who are new to the game. So overall, Marvel's Spider-Man is just amazing. Probably one of the best games I played from 2018 thus far, and probably might not even get beaten. So overall, I'm going to give Marvel's Spider-Man So, that's my review of Marvel's Spider-Man. A fantastic game, and definitely a game that people who love Marvel, who love the comics, who just love Spider-Man in general, or just love playing games, will absolutely love this game for sure. So, hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a like down below, subscribe, comment on what you think of the game, comment on what other games you think I could review, and I'll see you guys in the next random video.